to support. We were beaten. The first time the gun on water was tested on Kenya, it was tested on us. That was, I think, 2000. So that taught me a lesson. Whenever you see police and you are in a negotiation, take off. Don't negotiate. Kimbia, ukifika mbele, ni polisi wanafuata sisi hapa. So I was worried when we were in Berlin and this guy was saying, no, police don't do that. And strangely, they formed a corridor for us to pass through to go and present. And actually the minister came out to receive our petition, which in all intents and purposes was very strange to me. Very strange. So adaptations will always differ from one person to another. And these decisions are controversial. But you have to make a call as a director. You have to make a call, and if it's an informed call, if you have interacted with the text quite well, possibly interacted with the authors, and interacted with the curriculum, I'm pretty sure you will make a good call, which you can stick with and explain in a workshop during the presentation. An example of a lesion, maybe I can just give you one, is when you adapt a novel, you show, then it was adapted into a play production, then into a film, and they re-adapted back into a play production, but now a musical. And actually changed the setting from, of course, the forest to Eastlands. What would happen if, like, in Eastlands? And actually renamed it Simba Bazenga instead of Lion King. And then, of course, we have seen plays like The River Between, and One of the People. I'm sure you also watched, I don't know if you watched Eric Wainaina's adaptation of Tinga Tinga Tales, which is a TV drama into a musical and put it up at the Kenya National Theatre. And I think went out to the US for a round of shows. One of the best extrapolations that I've ever seen is the poem Invictus. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's an Irish poem that was adapted into a film. Was adapted into a film that featured into a film that told the story of Nelson Mandela. So Star started Hollywood adaptation. And then, of course, the example I had given you, the Tekayo, that I adapted into a narrative, and it became quite a sensation. Of course, there's also, if you have read the children's book In the Land of the Kitchen by Oluoch Madian, it was adapted into a children's musical and showcased here at the Kenya National Theatre. Extrapolation can also be from a news item, a TV magazine show, or a TV show, or and then brought into a play in the play form. So essentially, adaptation is simply one of the ways in which you can tell a story. It's not the only way. It's one of the ways in which you can tell a story. You can also adapt from play to play. We have seen that. From one language to another language. We've seen that. From one tradition or social context to another. And the best example I can give you this is Opio and Juliet by Miller's production, which was adapted from the story Romeo and Juliet, and also Simba Bazenga that I just told you earlier on. So why do we adapt? What is it that we need to adapt? We have to do it because we want to teach. Yeah? But we can also teach in other ways. For example, why do schools invite motivational speakers? I'm sure most of us, apart from John of India and I, most of us might have gone to school in the 2000s, secondary school. Yeah? I want to guess, so I don't see someone who might have been there earlier on. Most of us were in 2000. And 2000, and the post-millennium was in secondary schools in Kenya was characterized by motivational speakers. They will always invite somebody who will tell you that right now people are making a lot of memes about it. that I started my chicken farm with one feather. Or I started a butchery business with just a roof ya nyama. And here I am right now. It's characterized by a lot of motivational speakers. But why? We could just go to school and tell them a story, a motivational speech about the story, for example. I can see my teacher, Professor Clara Mumanyi, has written something here. I mean, we could just bring Professor Clara Mumanyi to the school and tell her, now tell us your story about Mapambazuko ya Machweo. Then the professor talks about it, and then she goes away. We pay her, and we say, blah. But will the students have taken something from it? Yes, they might. At what rate? That is where adaptation comes in, so that we can show them in a vibrant manner, so that we can show them in a memorable manner, so that we can stimulate their eye, we can stimulate their ear, and so that they can understand. Because the retention rate is high when both the ear and the eye are stimulated. These are biological issues, not literary nor artistic. So it's biological that when somebody is watching and listening something, the retention rate is high. They retain a lot of that material. That makes it very important to the lives of these students in terms of understanding the curriculum, in terms of understanding literature. Sometimes your work, the way I see it, is not so much as making the students pass the examination. And now this is controversial. It is not so much as making the students pass the examination. It is part of molding them into proper citizens. Because writers of these texts don't write to make these students pass the exams. They write to pass a message about the society. Okay? They write a message to pass about the society, and in most cases, those messages have moral lessons. Now, a teacher will teach the student to pass exams. Okay? But for you, you are teaching this student to understand the message of the author. And understanding the message of the author may not necessarily mean passing the exam. It may mean, yes, passing the exam, but it does not necessarily. It means something beyond passing exams. It means you are making this student understand the society that he or she is living in by reading this text. So your work goes beyond the curriculum needs. It's part, but also beyond the curriculum needs. So that is why it's important for the students to understand, so that when they are responding to questions, they apply to the real life situation. And that, I'm sure, I've never been an examiner in secondary school, but I should imagine if a student argues with the real life examples, the examiner should be able to give him or her more marks. I want to imagine that is the case. So when we adapt, we teach these students in a more relaxed manner, because it helps the learners have different perspectives of seeing the same thing. And therefore, a good actor and a good actress can help change perception of a certain aspect of a story in the learner. I've given you the story how Dr. Mateshe made me understand the government inspector. The gentleman acted the book so well until we looked at it and said, you mean this book is this interesting? When you start reading the book, it's interesting. You are reading about the government, these government officials in the house of the mayor, and they are talking how the place is filthy, the hospital is stinking, this market has not been washed for a long time, and then someone comes in and says that the government inspector has arrived. Very interesting when it opens. But when you are reading it, it's interesting. But when you watch it on stage, the way they reacted at the fact that the mayor, the government inspector himself has arrived, it is out of this world. You would now start to understand why they are the way they are. And then now you start understanding what corruption means to a society. You start understanding why people should do their work, public officers should do their work. So when you watch it, it sinks deep into your mind as to why some of the themes that Nikolai Gogol wanted to pass across. But when you are reading it, you just read it because you know you'll be asked what is the theme, what it is. But when you watch it, then you understand why are they panicking? Because they have not done their work. You don't just understand it because the government inspector is coming. You understand from what they say. You understand. Okay, I understood. Let me say it that way. I understood why they were panicking, because they had not done their work. And then, as they say the words, they come alive to you. You know, sometimes when you read a text, the words are there, but when they are acted, they come alive. You understand why the mayor is worried, because he has been taking money from people and not doing the work. All he was concerned with was the bribes. So a good actor can bring out that, and you see it. It comes alive to you as the person who is watching it. Adaptation is a social cultural affair. It boldly takes on contemporary context, working to rationalize it in dialogue with the past and involving the audience in a shared discourse. Something that, as you are acting out, it is not just for you, it's also for the audience. There is an interaction, although of course there's the fourth wall where the audience cannot respond, but they cannot respond, or we assume that they are not responding as actors, but they are responding. And you hear it, you feel it. When you are on stage, you feel the audience responding to you. Of course, you assume they are not responding. Of course, you assume that they are not seeing you. And they want to assume that they are simply peeping through your life on that stage in the artistic world. They are feeling, and you are feeling them. You can hear what they're saying. You can hear them responding to it. So it's a shared discourse with the narratives that form part of our artistic and literary, but also social and historical constitutions. I want you to take four ideas from this. The fact that it's contemporary, because we bring it into the contemporary world. When we are acting, we try to enact whatever time, in terms of setting, that this text was done. But we try to bring it into the understanding of the contemporary, because we are living in this world. Yeah. Secondly, it's dialogic, where what I'm saying, that they give you feedback and you use that feedback. I'm very sure those who are directors in this hall will know that sometimes when you put an unexperienced actor, they feel butterflies. Sometimes their voice starts shaking. Yeah. They start shaking. Why are they shaking? Because they are receiving feedback. They are receiving feedback. Somebody is watching them. Not just one person, but about 500 or so eyes are watching them, and it saps out the energy from them, and they start talking with the shaking voices. So it's dialogic. Dialogue does not mean you talk, I talk. No, it's that feedback. I give, you receive, and you give the feedback, and then I respond back to that. You get it? So you have trained these actors very well. You know, when you are rehearsing, she was doing her lines quite well, and when she gets on stage, the words just get lost. Sometimes somebody just gets rooted on stage and not speaking, not saying anything. It involves the audience, that one we have already explained. It's a shared narrative. Remember, they have read the text. They have read the text, and you come in to bring it into a fresh perspective. So you are sharing the narrative. And it's socio-historic, of course, from two points. The first point is that this is something that you have been allowed by the school, you know, as authorities, to share it. But most importantly, you are sharing a story from an author who comes from a social perspective, a historical perspective. Because when authors write, they write within context. Historical context, social context, political context, and so on and so forth. So you are sharing this with the students. Now, of course, theater brings a play to life through lighting, sound, scenic view, what we call the props, costume, stage sets, backdrops, and all these things simply conspire to help you tell the story. They are not the story, they help to tell the story. So we tell stories because stories matter. Importantly, stories matter. And that is why we need to tell our stories. I'm sure you must have heard of this idea of Wazungu coming here and then telling our stories and wonder, is that really us? The colonial stories, we were called monkeys, where we were moralized, an African is a stupid person, we were sexualized, an African is we were, what is the other trope of the empire? We were paternalized, Mzungu is always ahead, and Mzungu should be superior, Mzungu is the authority, Sisi, the Palechi. And then, yeah, there's modernization, there's infantilization, that we are childlike. The Mzungu is the father, and we are like children. That's the story they tell about us, And then I'm sure you must have been watching news where people say Nairobi is Kibera, So when the Mzungu comes, the first place that Mzungu should visit is, Kibera, to show how people we are poor and we need help and so on and so forth. And then when we start telling our story, we tell the story of KCCA and we say, oh, this is not Kenya, because we don't believe that Kenya can do this. A lot of them, because the media does not. The BBC, for example, or CNN does not focus on the good things we are doing, because it does not matter to them. But those stories matter to us. Those stories matter to us. So we tell stories because they matter. And we tell stories because they are important. Not to another person, but to us and to the students. That's the most important thing. Of course, we get a coin or two here. Who doesn't like a coin or two? Who doesn't want to pay his bills after having done a good work? We all need some money. Yes, we get money, but it is important that we tell these stories. And that is why we always say that it's always important to treat the source of the story not as a text, but the landscape of choices. So that as we try to mold it, it's a malleable alter transformation that remains integral to the storyteller's task. So as we have said, there is a performance through narration. We can do episodic scenes. We can do episodic scenes both in the novels, in the novel chapters, and so on. I had wanted to go through adapting the process of adaptation, but I'm seeing my time is not. So let me just go through a few tips on how to adapt a short story, because we may not do the novel here. Most important, and this is what I always say even to my students, if you want to understand a story, that there's only one way to read it. After you've read it, read it again. After you've read again, read it again. And read and read. When you go to direct, for example, and you will realize that there is something you have not understood, don't go to read that part alone. Read the whole text. Because our text is a unity. What is the one? You remember the Aristotelian unity of time, unity of place, unity of characterization. It's always important not to understand a text in bits. You have to understand the whole of it. So if you don't understand why this character says this line, you have to read the whole of it, the whole text, to understand where this character is coming from and why he's saying that line, and what importance is that line to the whole text. After you've read, the second thing is identify the spine of the story, because that is the most important. Remember, you are adapting it into a medium that is not the original. You are adapting it into a narrative. For example, Tekaya, you are adapting it into a narrative. Now, you cannot adapt the words, but you adapt the story. You can use your words, but you adapt the story. Of course, when you use the words in the story, it makes it more authentic. But most important, you adapt the story. You, of course, ask yourself very practical questions, and some of these practical questions are the following. What are the given circumstances in this play? What is the play's main central action? What is the main conflict? Which character is the play's protagonist, and what is he or she fighting for? What's the play's structure? The characters in the play, in the story rather, the language, and the themes. Of course, importantly is what do we want the audience to go away feeling? What do we want them to know at the end of it all? And that is something you can only get after reading and rereading the text. What is the mood? What's the style, and so on? How do the characters fit in this world? And once you've done all this, it becomes a critical inquiry into the play that leads you into the next steps. I think I want to stop there on adaptation, unless there is a question that is important, and then move to directing. I stand by it. Do I take questions right now, or do I finish the whole process and then we check the questions? We could take questions on adaptation.
Okay, if you have a question, just maybe quickly, we give you a microphone, you ask the question, and then maybe watatu wanne, and then aweze kujibu pamoja. Anani kuna swali? Go first.
I have a question on the area of adapting the novel to a play. Some of the novels iko na someone like msimulizi, first person. Is it allowed to adapt those narrations, the usimulizi to narrations? Ama inafaa kuwa na msimulizi as an actor on stage telling the story?
Those are two different ways of adapting. You could use the narrator who is on stage. Have you ever read F4 Sutherland? Who has read F4 Sutherland's The Marriage of Anansawa? It's a Ghanaian story, which the narrator is actually on stage. And the narrator is important because he supplies information that that the audience needs to understand what the actors are doing. So the narrator is like it's like a go-between the audience and the stage. And so the narrator will come and tell you, now, you see what Kwame is doing. Kwame is trying to create a way in which we understand that he's selling his child to the highest bidder and so on and so forth. So that is one of the ways in which we can adapt. That I'm not very sure how it will be, but it's one of the ways. It's one of the ways. Secondly, you can take a narrator of doing it. And this actor, this narrator actor, talks to the people, to the actors. So he or she lives in the artistic world. He or she does not live in the in-between world of the physical of the audience and the artistic one. He or she lives in the artistic world and makes commentaries about the artistic world, and not both ways. Because for a narrator like that one in F4 Sutherland, The Marriage of Anansawa, he literally comes to the audience and tells them, I'm telling you, this man is doing something very bad, and you are just about to see it. You see now what he's doing? He's selling his daughter to the highest bidder. Do you think that is right? Of course, the audience will respond, no, we can't sell our daughters, you know. But then again, goes and talks to Kwame and tells him, you know what you are doing is not right. You get the idea. Yeah. But of course, and the script is in such a way that Kwame will respond back to him. You get it. So there are ways in which different actors do different directors give different interpretations, but they are all okay. You finished?
I think
That's not
there's a question there.
That's the same point,
On the same thing,
maybe if you can give us make it more clear, given the story like Ken Saro-Wiwa, African Kids.
Yes, yes.
Because it says that it is just this person, one single
Yes.
person that is in the jail,
Yes.
is telling the whole story.
Yes.
How can you go about that in that particular story? It is just one person telling the whole story. Ken Saro-Wiwa, African Kids.
You reenact the story.
Okay.
You don't put this person in jail to tell the story. You get it? You reenact what he's saying. You give the people he's talking about in his mind, you give them lines, and they interact. It's the same thing as the man. I'm sure if you've read the Ken Saro-Wiwa's African Kids as a son, you've read the man, the story about Congo, where the guy kills the president. It's just that story, one person telling the story, usually third person narration, but then you reenact what he is saying. You don't reenact where he's sitting to say. You reenact what he's saying. You give those people lines to say. Yeah, let this gentleman finish what he wanted to say first, then we'll come to.
Okay, sir. What he is asking, he's asking if a story is a first persona.
Yes.
The story is about the first persona.
Yeah.
For example, me, I'm narrating my own story.
Yes.
Now he's asking if you can adapt,
Yes.
instead of me narrating as the first persona,
Yes.
you can bring a second persona or the third persona explaining the same story.
I think it's the same question that he has asked.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, we don't put you to sit down and narrate. We give your thoughts, characters, and lines, and we enact them. Because most times, first person narration are thoughts of the person. We don't bring that person here and then start saying that. You've watched the film Out of Africa. You've seen that it's written in first person narration. But when it was adapted to film, people were given lines. Why are you laughing? People were given lines. So it is actually a story being reenacted from prose. Yeah.
Maybe we hear from you.
Yes.
Then we go.
I feel also from others.
Okay, Doctor, that one was a little curious,
Yes.
and the fact that he has repeated it,
Yes.
because in that story,
Yes.
there is a writer of a letter. It's actually a letter.
Yes.
So the person speaking to the wife through the letter is Sazam. Is it Sazam? Our friend to Sazam and Jimba. So everything that is said in that story is a letter.
Yes.
So it's dear,
Epistolatory. Yeah.
I am here, my friends are sleeping, Sazam and Jimba, and so he continued. I could not continue this way. I had to take this position because I don't like it. So I get where the issue is, especially now that it is a letter. It is me speaking my things, but it is a letter actually. So we only imagine him sitting somewhere. But now that at the end of the story, we know it's also given to somebody.
Yes.
So I found it curious how that one is.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you for the clarification. You remember I talked about extrapolation.
Yes.
In that case, the short story starts without giving you, assuming that it's a jail. But for you, you will not assume it's a jail. You will have to recreate the jail. Okay? So you will start by establishing the jail. For example, you might start by bringing in a character who is not in the short story, a warden, who ushers in these jail bars. Okay? So once you see, once you bring in a warden, we already know that this is a jail, and then he puts them in on the stage now. he locks them in. And then these other guys sleep. And then this guy gets a letter from wherever, the paper from wherever he gets, and a pen, and starts writing and vocalizes. He speaks those lines. Then you can add something like, and this is how it happened. You change the scene. You go to the first scene now that is happening in this movie. Of course, in the text it's not written that way, but you are also using your creative temperament as a playwright to make the audience understand. Remember, we are adapting the story. We are not adapting the words that the author has written. So once we establish, because if you bring this guy here and start saying, now I'm in jail, I am doing this, that's not a play. Or when you show the jail itself, an author, a warden comes in, pushes these guys in, locks them in, and then you have a stage set of a wireman and a jail here, and then the guy is actually holding maybe the bars and then writing. It creates a bigger visual impact, one, and two, it creates memorability. And therefore, what we were talking about, the capacity for retention is a bit high, because the student understands what it means to be in jail and to lack the freedom that you need to enjoy.
Maybe you can take just two more in the interest of time. You, and then I will have Sling in then.
Okay. Thank you so much, Daktari, for this opportunity. My question is on artistic decision.
Yeah.
You've told us that the story must remain.
Yes.
And we must respect the author's intention.
Yeah.
But we find a situation whereby we have proverbial stories where the author's intention is not in the story. Sana sana kwenye hadithi fupi kwa Kiswahili tulipata kwanza kulikuwa na kikaza. The author's intention was hidden. Sasa hivi bado kuna hadithi nyingine ambayo julikana kama Mwalimu Mstaafu. The author's intention is not in the story because I believe the author is speaking about mfumo wa 844 kuondolewa, kuna mfumo mpya. Sasa sisi kama wachezaji, how do we get on the author's intention while it's not in the story? Do we put it in narration? Do we change the story, or how do we go about it?
The author's intention has always to be in the story. It must
But
always
sometimes you have proverbial stories.
Yes.
Kwa Kiswahili tunaweza sema maana yake kufiche, hajaitoa.
Yes.
Kwa hivyo kwa hadithi yenyewe hajaeleza directly. You have it's your interpretation. Mine may be different to somebody
Now
else.
I get you. A different interpretation of the author's intention. That's why sometimes, by the way, I always don't subscribe to the author's intention. I'd rather, but of course now for this, we have to. And that is why we say, read the text again and again and again. Because honestly, I believe the author wants to pass across something. And that something that he or she wants to pass across is what we call the theme. And that theme must come out. Now, sometimes, as you say, some of these things are so hidden. Like when we were trying to adapt the Kali, for example, when we read it the first time and the second time, we just saw it was about the meat. You know, this man, when you can get something and then you get so attached to it until it becomes an obsession. Only to realize later when we were interacting with one of our teachers, Dr. Evans Mugarizo, that this thing is a different thing altogether. You know, it is, this guy was actually eating his own grandchildren. You get it? So sometimes the author's intention is really hidden. One, especially in Kenya here nowadays, we are a bit free. Especially in Kenya here, we don't talk about some things. So somebody hides all of those, you know, in metaphors and symbolisms and figurative language until you read. Is he talking about nyama and kawaida, or what is he talking about? You know. So then it becomes upon you also to use your creative literary knowledge to be able to understand what he's talking about. And we must always agree that sometimes our interpretation might be different. But most importantly, what then will guide you at that moment is the syllabus. what is it saying about what the teacher needs to teach this student. So once you read now the syllabus, then it can guide you on what you want to interpret. Because at some point, and this is what I want to whisper, your interpretation, which will be very right, will be in contrary to the syllabus. Sometimes you might interpret this text and you know, because of your experiences and what you have read in life, your interpretation is different, and it's the best. But you must be guided by the syllabus. Because this, if you give the student your interpretation, which is correct, depending on how much you have been able to understand, this, the student will be lost. And then when he or she answers the question, it will be wrong. So be guided by the syllabus. Where you are in doubt, see what the syllabus says about it. That way it will help. Because I'm sure also authors at some point they are scandalized. They read the syllabus and want, no, this is not what I was talking about. But because somebody sat at KICD and decided this is what the author is saying, this is what will go. Okay? This is what will go. I was reading Blossoms of Savannah with my students and I was telling them, listen, this story, forget about you are told in high school because they just come from high school. This story is not about female genital mutilation. This story is about women empowerment, and I was saying, where is the women empowerment in this story? I asked them, when the story starts, what happens? This girl is dreaming about going to Egerton University. When the story ends, what is happening? University. So the story is not about FGM. FGM is just part of the obstacles that women go through. And for a character, authors, so when you start, one of the things they were saying, or they were told at school that women are their worst enemies, you know, Mama Melanoi allows the daughter to be circumcised. I tell you, these are sideshows. The most important person in that story is a Makerere, a person who empowers. And this is the one that the author wanted to us to emulate. To see the perspective of a Makerere is much more important in that story than. But of course, I can't tell you guys to go and enact it that way because that is not what is in the syllabus. That's not what is in the syllabus.
It's so insightful, and I have about 3 people. I wish.
I take a short time.
I wish they all ask the 3 questions, then you ask them once. Maybe we will be through.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ali. My first question is, how do you go about flashbacks? For instance, or rather, is it in order to change it into present? Then lastly, especially in short stories, a story like Fadila Zapuna in Papa Bazuka Machweo. Second one, when adapting the story, you realize there are some scenes that are political. Is it in order for us to relate it with the current situation where we are not allowed to take sides when it comes to politics? Thank you.
Okay, Dr. My name is Mwangi. My question is, especially in adaptation, is the hand of God allowed? What I mean by the hand of God is, I know you understand what I'm saying. The hand of God, like
Don't ex machina.
Yeah?
Don't ex machina.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, is it allowed in adaptations?
The last one.
Thank you. My name is Shell. I'm from Elect. I was asking, what about it's about the letter. For example, there is a story where a lady from the university goes to meet with a man, a political leader. And then the main story is on the letter that the lady finds in the pocket of the political leader. So this letter, do we go about the same way to stage it, or is there any other way? A letter about 1.5 pages.
Thank you, that will be all that time.
Thank you. On flashbacks, I don't think you can change it into present because you confuse the students. The best way to do it is to make one of the actors say, and I remember, this is what happened at that time. First of all, that character will say something. Will say something about the remembrance, about the memory, and then say, and this is what happened. If it was a happy moment, and this is how it happened. If it was a sad moment, and this is how it happened. If it was whatever the situation, you need to contextualize it. To some extent, even changing the set. Finding a way in which we change the set so that it is now back in the flashback, and then when you bring it to the present, you rearrange the set again, so that the visual setting is different. On political scenes, I'll be very hesitant. I'm very hesitant to advise that we bring in the current situations, because every text has its setting, and that setting may not be correct. Although most times they are congruent, they are related, but allow the students to relate. Do not feed them with that relation. Let them relate on their own, so that when they are responding to the questions, they can relate in the questions that they respond to, and whoever is examining will now make that decision whether to award them a mark or not. And again, I think politically it's sensitive. Political issue is sensitive. You never know who will mark that student's work. People might have taken sides, and passionately so, and you give and you make the student get disadvantaged. And when you say the hand of God, yes, especially in short stories, you need to resolve, and that resolution needs to come very fast. And if it has to come very fast, the hand of God is important. It is like whenever you watch many of the secondary schools performances in the Kenya schools and colleges, because they have only 40 minutes. You can't build a story and resolve it. You have to be a very good writer to build a story and resolve it in 40 minutes. At some point, you'll have to bring in the hand of God. Especially stories that end with moral lessons, you will have to. Unfortunately, I'm advising you that, which is what I know as a theater artist, it's wrong. But you have to, so that you resolve. And especially when you are adapting a short story and you are using episodic plot, you have to bring in the resolution very fast. And sometimes, if you build it a lot, you may end up taking an hour. Especially where you have extrapolated. Yeah? Then you said the epistolatory, the letter, do we stage it or do we ignore it? I would say it depends. It depends on what material you have. Because you might want to reenact it, and that will mean extrapolating a lot. And that means taking more time. So you may just want to make this character who is reading it, read it on stage and reenact it like a monologue. Okay? But now the reenaction is not on the actions in the letter. It is on the reading. You get it? So that if you are to reenact the actions, then now you have to change the set again to bring in what is happening. But I'm imagining a letter will have, even a letter of one page will have a lot of changes of scenes. There are a lot of information. So reenacting it might take a lot of time, and it might need so many scene changes, which might not be practical. I would say you can make this person read it, and then it is upon the person who is reading it, especially if it's a girl, as you say, reenact and do a lot of stage activities, stage businesses. You can read, pause, think about it, move around, sit down, read this, react to that line, and then move again, maybe, now if it is something very happy, carry her legs up and lie as she's reading, make it lively for the audience, not just standing there and reading and saying, so this is it. No, make it much more lively to the audience. Thank you. Allow me to go to directing production. Of course, as I had said earlier on, the most important thing in a play production is a script analysis, which we have talked about given circumstances. And these given circumstances actually give you the backstory, which is always important for you to move to directing. One, you need to know the time. Two, you need to know the place. Three, you need to know the environmental facts. And four, you need to know the social environment and political environment. Politically, it is how the society is ordered. For you as a director, what do you need? What are your tools? The first thing is, of course, the script. And in this case, we are talking the script written by a script writer. So even if you are adapting, you need to have a script. You need to have a script. If you are adapting a Blossom of Savannah, have the stage script. That is very important. Don't adapt from imagination. Don't improvise. Have the script, then improvise from the script. Otherwise, you get into problems. Two, you'll need the director's copy. Director's copy is where the stage manager extracts the prompt book. Okay? I'm now becoming too much of a teacher. The director's copy is the copy after you have read the text, after you have identified the spine of the story, after you have identified the given circumstances, you do the scribbling inside. We will talk about it as we go by. You do the scribbling inside it. Those scribblings are very important. As we start the story, where are we? What is the lighting? What is the sound? Where is the positioning of the characters? What costume are they wearing? What is the stage looking like? Mise en scène. I'm sure you must have done that. What are they holding in their hands as props? And what is on the set? Every line must have those 7 elements that we'll talk about. 8 elements that we'll talk about later. So the director's copy is written by the director and is used by the director during rehearsals and meetings with designers and managers. I don't know if you guys have managers and designers, but it's important. If you have somebody who will be on sound, that person becomes a sound manager or designs the sound for you. I'm sure we collaborate, so there's somebody who will be doing sound, and this person designs the sound and has a mixtape of the whole production. That now becomes a sound designer, even if he's one of the actors. He becomes the sound designer. He designs it, makes a mixtape, and then manages that sound during the production. So they need to read from the director's copy. You need to advise them from the director's copy. The prompt book, as we have said, it is the director's copy given, a copy of the director's copy given to the stage manager to use to run the rehearsals. So when we talked about script analysis, previous actions, the backstory, then you analyze the characters, what the director needs. We have talked of the director's copy, the prompt book, and the rehearsal schedule, of course. Before you start rehearsals, ladies and gentlemen, have a rehearsal schedule. It will save you a lot of chaos. One of the things I've understood with the actors, I work with them, I work with students who eventually become actors. When they get a leeway, they maximize it. So once you have a rehearsal schedule, you have put them in a box, and they would most probably they would follow that box. If you give them a chance to be out of that box, they will do a lot of things that you don't want. So I would say put a rehearsal schedule becomes like a box in which we can all fit in, and that way it becomes important for you. Then, of course, we have the production schedule. This is usually by the producer, says that I've gone to these and these schools, and therefore we want to do this play on this date, we want to do that play on that in that school on that date, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you have the production concept of every production. A production concept is actually for marketing, sales, advertisement purposes. We are doing Blossoms of the Savannah. We want to tell the story about women empowerment or about the negative effects of FGM or whatever. This production concept needs to come from the syllabus. What is the end product? So you see our theater production team, which is doing set books accredited by KCCA and the Ministry of Arts and the Ministry of Education, would like to come and present Blossom in the Savannah, in which we tell students about the themes that have been approved for teaching. So in that way, you remain within the curriculum, but at the same time, you are selling your production as something that is within the legally approved structures. Then all directors you must write. Okay, when I was thinking about this thing, I had thought I should give you an assignment, but I had thought I should give you an assignment so that you write for me the production concepts of all the plays you are doing. But because of time, I'll spare you that. If there is, okay, it's part of the things that I was thinking about. The prompt book is a master copy of the script or score. It contains all the actor moves and technical cues, and is used to run rehearsals and later control the performance, usually by the stage manager. Remember, in a professional performance, it's not the director who runs the show, it's the stage manager who runs the show. Once the director has finished the work, he or she takes a walk. The stage manager runs the production and the performance. It's prepared by the director and handed over to the stage manager to help run the rehearsals. Of importance, it contains contact lists, show reports, local amenities, and so on and so forth. It's a production bible. Normally, how we make it is most times authors don't like us photocopy the work, but for directing purposes, you photocopy it on one side, one page, and then the other side, if let's say this is the page you photocopied, on this side you have the words of the author, and here is left blank, so that you put those instructions here. For example, if a character moves stage right, you write here. Character A moves stage right, or the light comes on, or light remains off, or light remains constant, and then the sound, there's a change of sound here because of what the character is saying, or if the character moves and the other one comes in, or if we need to choreograph a dance here, and so on and so forth. Everything that will be done on that stage is written here, so that when the stage manager is using it to run the rehearsals, he or she can pick your mind from what you've written there. If an actor questions why you are asking him, and they do, which is very healthy, why you are asking him to move down stage right instead of upstage, you are able to tell that, you see, I'm telling you to move this way because of what you had done earlier on. So it is in congruence, it is in tandem with what is previous, because an actor may see his or her move alone, is not seeing the move of another person. For example, you are telling that the actor to move this side so that you allow another character who is coming in. That actor may not know that his character needs to adjust for the sake of the other one who is making his or her entry. It's used throughout the rehearsal, and it has notes on blocking, lighting, and so on. And mostly we write those notes in pencil. Why do we write them in pencil? So that sometimes you get on stage, you are directing, and you realize, this move, as I had thought about it on paper, it's not working on stage. So you need to rub and redo it and rethink about it. That is why you change. You change it in the director's copy, but you tell the stage manager to change it in the prompt book. So what is usually in the prompt book? Essentially, that is directing now. What is in the prompt book is the directing. it has 7 elements. The first element is the actor movement. The second element is the actor emotion. The third element is the actor voice. And then, of course, now within those, we have emotions, behavior through expressions and gestures and so on. The fourth element is the cues, which in this case are the sound cues and the lighting cues. And the fifth element is, the sixth element is now the stage itself, what we call the mise en scène, the set, how is it looking like, the costuming, the props, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that we direct. In most cases, that's what we direct. Actually, I'm sure that is what you do. You direct the actor, you direct the designers, and you direct the stage. You decide that in this scene, this is how the stage will look like. That is mise en scène. You decide that in this scene, this is what the actor is saying, and facing where, and with what expressions, and with what tone, and with what pitch, and with what tempo, and all those variations. So just to summarize, there are some notations in play analysis that we use. When we see DS, we mean downstage. When you use US, we mean upstage, SR, stage right, CS, stage center, and so on and so forth. These are some of the things that I can give this discussion to Wandera to pass it. Thank you so much. I have put that thank you so much in very many languages. In languages that I can speak. So you can ask me any question in those 5 languages. I speak them above B1 level. So just me in German, I respond in English, in Swahili, in the other language, and then in French. Thank you.
All right, Daktari, asante sana. That has been so insightful. I believe that members hapa, wasanii and directors na producers ambao hapa wana maswali. Kwa hivyo kama kuna swali ambalo ulikuwa umebakisha, tupeane saa hizi, maana akimaliza amemaliza. Kwa hivyo tuanze hapa.
Yes, Daktari. That was nice. Thank you so much. I am Brown Agutu, the Alphas Production. So my question is about the adaptation and directing. Let's say you've got a story. The writer has begun by saying this person, maybe he came into his house and found that the family is dead. Then after you have read the story, maybe in the middle of it, he's telling you this person is getting born. Maybe he's talking to his maybe the child who is dead. So I was asking, is it wrong for maybe someone to begin the story from the beginning to the end during your adaptation?
We adapt the story. So sometimes you will rearrange that story so that you're starting from the end.
You start from, it has begun from the end.
Yes.
And then maybe in the middle, the writer has taken it back again to the beginning. Then when you read, he's taking it to another place. So is it okay for you to rearrange the scenes?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yes. You readapt, you rearrange, you adapt by rearranging. Yeah. Okay. So that it makes, remember, it's the story you are telling, not the words of the author. It's the story you are telling. So the author might have started from the end and bring it into the beginning. You may want to do that, but remember to use the flashback technique of play production. Of play production, not of prose. Because prose will not tell you to say, I remember this is what happened. But for you as a dramatist, you will remember to say, your character to say, this is not what happened. This that I'm about to show you is what happened. Okay? You cue the audience. Remember you are doing it for the audience who is live. Unlike the author, whose audience is a reader. Yours is not a reader, he's a person watching and a person listening. So you tell him or her that this is what happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
And next one,
Okay, hapa nyuma.
Thank you, Daktari. I'm Kelvin, producer Leaders Theatre, and it's a pleasure to meet you again. Well, I'm talking, I wanted to ask you, it being about casting, we have casting directors and we still have directors who do direct. So it was a humble request so that we can avoid something which affects many people, many producers or many directors, wrong casting. So I will beg or request if you can just talk a little more or advise more about direct casting.
Okay.
Yes, so that we can avoid the wrong casting or what we should consider very much when we are casting. Thank you.
Yes, in theater we have what we call dramaturgs, dramaturgy, and this is usually somebody who can advise. It's a sort of an advisor to the production. This will be a much more important person than a casting director in an educational setting, because a casting director is a professional person who will need to be paid, you know, and bearing in mind the kind of production houses that we have, we may not afford. And a casting director will want to do this thing professionally, not as an educational thing. You get it? So he'll give you professional advice on acting, okay? But not necessarily on acting an educational play. What I would suggest is the director uses his or her own discretion after having read the play, the production, and after having read the educational needs. Because at the end of an academic cycle, an educational cycle for the secondary school, there are expectations. There are those learner outcomes that the teacher needs to have met. So you are helping the teacher to meet those learner outcomes, okay? And I think the syllabi is available at KICD, you guys can buy it. So once you understand what is needed by the end of this term, or by the end of reading this text, the learner should have known ABCD. Those are the things that you bring in. And as you're casting, you are casting knowing that this actor or this actress can help me meet this objective. It's the learner outcome. If that actor or actress does not meet, help you meet that, then you might have to drop him or her. And this is not personal, it's business. Yeah, because you also want to maintain the image of your group. And sometimes people disagree. Let's just face it, people disagree. If this person is not meeting that objective, however good or an actor that person is, or however friendly or whichever other means, you have to drop that person to maintain the integrity of the theater room. Because already you are being fought from other quarters. You don't want internal fights. Yeah.
Okay, asante sana. I think that will be it with the questions. Na daktari, nashukuru sana kabisa. Thank you so much. I will take this opportunity to let our chairman.
So thank you so much. I usually enjoy making this kind of discussions because they also expand me as a teacher of artists. They make me understand what you artists think about, especially when you give me this kind of feedback. So they make me improve my experiences. I thank you so much for having invited me and for having listened to me.
Asante sana. Dr. Martin. Dr. Emmanuel Shikuku. Asante sana. This guy is always rich, right? Yes, he's always rich. Every time I listen to him, I learn something new every time, especially when it comes to adaptation. At least tamthilia ama play huwa tunaandikiwa vitu vingi, but when it comes to adaptation, he's always rich. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Where's the cameraman?
The cameraman. The cameraman is here.
Okay, now.
Thank you very much.
Cameraman, what is it? These are moments we never get easily.
I think this is the time to have kupiga picha naye na wageni wetu hapa as we're waiting for lunch because imechelewa kidogo. Tupige picha ndio pia tusipoteze muda mwingi tena tungoje lunch tena na picha. So cameraman, I hope you're ready. Si ndio? Yes. We're ready.
Okay, before cameraman akwe ready, vile chairman amesema, we'll have a photo session hapa tu na Daktari Shikuku na pia mhariri wetu Bifike na mhariri wetu Bifike Mgama na author wetu mmoja pia hapa. Also for you to note, hapa ndani tuko na mwongozo wa Pambazuka Machweo. Ni one of the books ambazo tunahitaji sana na pia walimu wetu pia wanahitaji na wale ambao wanajua wamerequest. So it goes for only 500 shillings, mwongozo wa Pambazuka Machweo. Na umeweza kutengenezwa vizuri kabisa na wenyeji ambao wamebobea. Pia tunacho kitabu cha Pambazuka Machweo kama bado hauna, na unaweza kipata hapa na iweze kupigwa autograph papa hapa na mhariri wetu pia na mwandishi wetu ambaye yuko hapa pia. Pia ni shilingi 500 tu. Kunavyo vichache, si vingi, vichache kabisa. Kwa hivyo yule ambaye atakuwa wa kwanza ama wa pili atabahatika nayo. Mwongozo nitakupatia. Tukimaliza tu nitakupatia. Ni si mingi sana. Asante. Haya, naomba kwamba basi wakati huu tuweze kuchukua, tuweze cameraman set us up, tuweze kupiga picha hapa, lights zifike, and then naomba mkaribie. We take photos maybe as a group, and then we take maybe mko wawili, watatu, that would be good. Hapa. Karibuni ndio.
Okay, we are going to start with the executive. Hakuna jambo tumie hii sasa. We are going to start with the executive, please. If you can start the executive, ndio picha na wahariri na mwandishi wetu na doctor pale. Then after that, members wote, then the lady. Yes.
Mhariri hapa atakuwa ni mhitimu, then mwandishi pia hapa na kama tuambie tufanye. Tuambie kama
ama tukuandaa.
Wapige smile ama sipige smile hapo. Producer sawa smile. Sasa sana.
Kinachoini nadhani kujeni.
Not all clear for share vizuri pia.
Nothing.
Kuja next. Chapa hiyo kwanza. Mtu yote tusimwache nje, kwa hivyo atufungie mtu yote nje. That's good. Next thing.
Yes. Me too.
Sawa?
Twende.
Hiyo nyingine watu watatu. Wataonekana
Poa sana. Kiwa bena swai na utoke kwa TV.
Moja, hii timu inafaa ichape hivyo yote tafadhali. Okay, next team. Next team, yes. Hao wote ya matongezi. Wapige peke yao. Ili mgonje sana. Waya mbili moto amika. Lakini hata lini zoezi. Ladies, please. Balance the equation. Alafu sasa alafu chama ni BC peke yake na hii nyingine. Hapa ingine moja. Hata mkurugenzi wanasema. Ashauri. Sawa, ndio kubali. Iliandika pekee.
We look at it or we look at it?
We look at it. We look at it.
And the second one.
Yeah, there's someone. I noticed this person.
Hey,
It's not with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Kuna swali moja daktari, there is one of us ameuliza swali moja na akasema it is important you address it. They were asking the short courses about art that you guys offer in KU, if there is any, you can just mention them and tell them the duration and all that.
We used to have an Institute of African Studies that we had a short course of 3 weeks, or 3 or 4 weeks on education. Not I'm not sure. But one can be tailor-made for you if you so wish, because there is an Institute of African Studies led by Professor Catherine Dung, very renowned Swahili scholar. Still, I'm not sure, because you know, after COVID, a lot of restructuring KU and a massive restructuring. Right now, I think they are actually trying to move a whole division of finance to compress. But I think it is still there. Perhaps I can get the correct information and pass it to Lorraine, who can pass it to your groups. But I also know that KCA is coming up with such short courses. We might ask and see how far they are with those courses. Most important, of course, is you could do a certificate course, which is usually in performing arts, which is usually 6 months. That one requires, of course, graduation. It's the 2-semester course you take both in film and theatre. Both at Kenyatta University and KCA. I'm saying because I teach in both universities. I know that those short courses that you can take, like you start from September and then you finish in April. Or you start in April, or you start in January and finish in August. Those who started teaching in January and finishing this August. So it's possible to get that certificate course. But the short courses, I know KU, we used to have one for 4 weeks. Have I answered the question? Yes. Thank you. Welcome to KU.
Okay, now as the lecturer sits down, we are going to have our meals ziko ready. Pale maji tulikunywa chai pale asubuhi, chakula kwa tayari, naomba tuweze kwenda tukule, alafu tuweze hapa baada ya kula